Yes, welcome to the Biz Communication Show. I'm your host, Bill Lampton, the Biz Communication Guy. Every week, having a lively, highly informative discussion with a guest whose tips and strategies will help us in our business. I know certainly they help me, and I know they help all of our viewers on YouTube and our podcast listeners as well. Today, it's a genuine pleasure to welcome Jeannie Cullen Schultz. She joins us today from Janesville, Wisconsin, where she serves as co president of J.P. Cullen, an industry leading construction company. Jeannie attended Dartmouth College to play basketball, intending to become a sports coach, but the prospect of joining the family business changed that path, and we're going to talk about that. She took the steps necessary to gain the knowledge and experience to join the family business, including working elsewhere first as a project manager for HVAC contractor North American Medical. In 2013, Jeannie assumed responsibility for expanding the healthcare market in Dane County, resulting in work in every hospital in Madison, Wisconsin, and relationships with 92% more healthcare clients than JP Cullen had previously. As co president, Jeannie partners with her brother George to further strengthen the organization for the next generations. In line with the Cullen tradition, Jeannie is devoted to her family, and along with her husband and 5 children, she is passionate about Badger basketball and football. So join me now in welcoming Jeannie. Hello, Jeannie. Welcome to the Biz Communication Show.
Hi, thanks for having me today.
Jeannie, I mentioned in the introduction, which you very kindly provided, that you were a basketball star at the university level and you had ideas about becoming a sports coach. And many people would say that would be a little bit possibly more comfortable than going into the family business. I grew up in a family that had a family business, and I personally and by choice stayed away from it. I just thought maybe that wouldn't work for me, but you had a different idea, a different approach. So tell us, please, about why you chose to get into the family business and now you are co-head of it.
Yeah, definitely. So I had an interesting path growing up and was one of, I believe there's 13 of us cousins. I'm the only one that never worked at JP Cullen growing up, which is pretty unique. But I was always very dedicated to my basketball passion, whether it be training and getting ready to play at the collegiate level or doing coaching, private lessons, things like that, as that's always what I thought I wanted to do. And I know that I'm still very passionate about basketball and coaching and teaching, but ultimately, after doing it for a couple of years at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, I realized I love basketball, but I'm not sure it's the career that I want to have for the rest of my life. For those that know a little bit about college athletics, it's very recruiting is huge, traveling is huge, and I know I'm a pretty competitive person and was going to want to keep moving up the ranks. So that would mean uprooting my family up every couple of years, and ultimately, I didn't think that was the lifestyle that I wanted, and have a tremendous amount of respect for anybody that does coaching. So with that said, I was 27 of 30 credits into a master's degree in educational leadership with a focus on athletic administration, and had only ever done college or basketball coaching, regardless of the level. So I consulted with my dad, who is a great mentor, both professionally and personally, and he suggested, well, why don't you sit down and talk to a couple women in business and women specifically in the construction industry. And I was fortunate enough to talk to 3 women at various stages of their business and professional career. And they really opened my eyes to construction as just like any business. Sure, there's fewer females in construction than males, but that's much like college athletics, or any athletics, I should say. At least with my experience, I was always, playing basketball with a group of men or guys, and usually in the minority as a woman. So they showed me, if you're willing to work hard, roll your sleeves up, learn, ask good questions, you can be successful in this industry. And I'm certainly glad, looking back, I think that would have been in about 2009 when I had those conversations and ultimately made the change. I'm so glad I did, because this has been a true blessing and awesome experience so far, both at North American Mechanical and JP Cullen.
Well, looking at your current position as co-president of the company, there's no doubt in my mind that communication skills play a vital part in your leadership.
Yeah.
So, talk to us, please, about what you consider some of the most important communication skills, maybe how you learned them, how you practice them, and also, what have you learned about communication on the job? It's one thing to learn about it academically, but it's another thing to learn about it on the job.
Yeah, definitely. Great question. I think for me, the most important thing I learned, again, from my dad, is to listen, and listen more than you talk. You can learn a lot, whether it's in a meeting, with a client, with your own team members, if you listen and really understand what's going on in the room, and then be able to respond accordingly. So I think that's a big thing. I do see sometimes that people are so intent on getting their point across or getting their idea out there that they maybe skip that step of listening, and really understanding what's going on. The other thing, and I believe this is something that Darcy Loma touched on, is just the importance of two-way communication. So often, you can say something and think everybody in the room, or if it's a one-on-one setting, they totally understand what you're saying. And then you walk out and circle back a couple days later and you're like, what happened here? Why didn't that get done? Or why didn't it get done in the way that I thought in my mind we were on the same page? So two-way communication, and really making sure you understand what the person is saying, or that the person you're talking to understands your intent. And then one thing that I'm, continuing to focus on, and, I don't know that there's a ton of people that like giving tough news or breaking bad news, but I'm learning how important it is to be proactive and direct. And it's obviously not something that's not a surprise how important that is, but it can be tough, especially in my role now as the co-president. Usually the phone rings more with challenging news or opportunities than it does with good news. So just the importance of stepping back and dealing with whatever the issue or concern is at the time, proactively and directly. So I think those are the three things, and they all sound relatively easy in theory, but as you said, the on-the-job communication and what happens in the construction industry can be challenging as well, because of the pressure and getting buildings built faster, cheaper, is really intense. And our men and women in the field really go through a lot, and we want to make sure we're doing everything we can to support them through proper communication.
I applaud those 3 points you make. And Jeannie, I often have told the story, and several times on the Biz Communication Show, about early in my career as a communication consultant, after I'd been a faculty member in communication, and also then I'd spent some time in management. So when I started my presentation career, there was a group in nearby Atlanta that asked me to come speak to them, give them a 1 hour program at lunch, which I was delighted to do. And they asked me ahead of time, they said, we're going to have a printed program. So ahead of time, tell us what your topic is. And I said, fine, my topic is listen your way to the top, which is something, as you indicated, really is vital and helpful, instead of just speaking your way to the top. So you can almost guess the rest of the story. When I got to the meeting and looked at the program, it said that I was speaking on speak your way to the top. So I pulled the chairman aside and I said, I don't want to embarrass anybody, but this is a time for me to make a great point, that I even said, listen your way to the top.
Yeah.
And that was what I asked you to put in print, but just by impulse, you put speak your way to the top. That broke the ice for the meeting. And then I remember so well, we had a 1 hour, very interactive session with all of us talking about listening problems and how we could become better listeners. And then that leads to your second point, which to me is again very vital. Managers, executives, CEOs, many of us think, okay, I told them. I told them once.
Yeah.
Why didn't they get it? And yet, this is where what we call reflective listening comes in so significantly. And I imagine you practice this where you say, would you repeat back to me the instructions as you understand them? Is that a tactic that you've used, Jeannie?
Yes, definitely. And it's spot on. And it works when you do that. Sometimes you feel a little silly or like, hey, maybe I don't need to do this. But every time I do it, the intent of my message seems to be more well received and on the same page. So definitely.
Oh yes, and those points that you made, I'm just I support them very strongly. In fact, one of the points that I often make with people that I'm dealing with is that you are not insulting someone when you remind them of an instruction,
Yeah.
because this can help even clarify what what was what they were asked to do if you remind them of it. I know early in my management days I thought, well, that would be a little insulting or abrasive. No, it's not. It's not. People need reminders. We all do.
Yeah.
So your tips right there are on target. And I guess I have to ask, were those you learned in your management, your MBA program, or were these things that you learned on the job, or a combination?
Yeah, I'd probably say a combination. I've been very fortunate through my time and career in athletics to be involved in a lot of team situations, and I'll say um, big moments too, from playing in an NCAA tournament game, studying at Dartmouth, things like that. You learn so much in doing, but then definitely being able to supplement it with some of my work, whether it was at Dartmouth College or at UW Madison. Going back to just thinking about communication at the athletic level and the teams, we're bringing together 12 to 15 women from all over the country to play basketball, which is a great opportunity, but it also is a great teaching moment too, because everybody learns differently. Everybody has different experiences, background levels, styles of communication. And, with 12 to 15 women, or probably 12 to 15 men, a lot of times some of us think our idea is the way to go, or we should do it this way. And you have to learn to adapt your style as well as your messaging to make sure you get through to all team members, because you're only as good as your weakest team member. And if we pull together, you can have a good success. So definitely would say it's a combination of real life experience and then also being fortunate to have a decent amount of academic experience as well.
I'm happy you mentioned communication styles, because when I was in management at the vice president level in healthcare and higher education for 2 decades before I became a consultant, I wish I had known what I learned late in my career there, what I learned about communication styles. I was probably like many people in that, first of all, I made two mistakes. One was I wondered why everybody didn't like to communicate like I did. And then secondly, I thought, well, I can change their communication style.
Yeah.
And it was only after I became acquainted with DISC and DISC and those four different styles, after I became acquainted with that, I thought, my gosh, if only I had known this earlier in my management career,
Yeah.
then the people who were a very high D. I'm a very high I. And of course that's an automatic clash right there. And the I person cannot understand why the D person is so demanding, and the D person can't understand why the I person is so casual. Are you familiar with those styles?
Yeah, definitely not an expert, and it's been a little bit since I've taken my own, but I would probably be more in the D camp than the I. And uh, what's interesting is my brother George and I, who are, as you mentioned, co-leaders, co-presidents, over the last 3 years now that we've been in this role, just seeing how similar we are, but also how different we are, especially when it comes to communication. He's definitely more of a make a decision, communicate, move on. Uh, Very firm in his communication as well. I'm a little bit more of a processor and like to take some time to think about things and understand all the impacts that a decision or the players and people involved in the decision may have. But just seeing how our two different styles can meld together and ultimately lead the company and get the overall corporate vision and business plan across our 600 plus employees that we have is pretty cool, and using our complementary personalities to get there.
That's the key,
Yep.
is to understand the differences and yet to see how each person can make the mental and verbal adjustments to cooperate well enough with the other person. And
Yep.
even though you don't really, you don't ever possibly grasp why are that way, that's not the important point, is it? The important point is that's the way they are. We're not going to change them. And so we need to just make those adjustments when we're communicating with them. I've often thought that families would benefit very much from understanding the different styles. Couples would. I remember many years ago when my wife and I were first married, my father, who managed a family department store, had at that time a management expert come in and give some surveys, personal surveys to his employees, and he asked us as newlyweds, "Would you like to do this?" And we did, and each one of us filled out a form. I have no idea what it was way back then. And then when we were to meet with the man for the report, his first question was to us, "Why did you two get married?"
Oh man. Well, that's a good one.
Yeah, so I think on a personal basis and a working basis. Time for something else for you to mention. And I noticed, of course, in looking at your 130-year-old company, that you have become increasingly devoted to promoting mental health in your community. What prompted that, and what have the results been, Jeannie?
Yeah, I think it's something that's always been important to JP Cullen. We're a family business first and foremost, and as you said, have been one for 130 years. And even though we've grown from 25 to 50 employees to now 600, we as a family genuinely care about our employees and their mental well-being, and want to make sure they know that whether it's coming to a Cullen, a fellow coworker, or now a program that we have that's available to all our tradespeople as well as our employees, there are resources available. It doesn't, everybody knows how much is going on in the world right now, whether it's with your home life, your family, your kids' schools, your neighbors, the economy. It's a really challenging time for people right now, and making sure that when our men and women come to work, they know they're in a safe place, but also that there's people that care about them and want to make sure they have the access and resources to things that they maybe don't know exists. The other thing is just we've seen from a number of our employees and friends, people, how long it can take right now to get into a mental wellness, provider to get the care and services you need. So we're now working with a third party called Perspectives that is basically available to our team members and their families on call. So if they call them, there's somebody there that can talk to them, can triage them, and get them in connection with somebody that can help work through a situation regardless of the severity. So it's really important, like I mentioned, starting with being the family businesses. We want to make sure our team members are happy, are healthy, and have the support they need, regardless if it's a work thing or personal.
I think you made an outstanding point there that many of us are in a decade which has pressures from all sides.
Yeah.
Economic, global, I could mention so many.
Yeah.
And one of the things that here again is where many of us, as we get more experienced in life, I think many of us change our opinions about mental health. Sometimes it's because a family member or a friend is affected and that affects us. But early in life, in our naivety, many of us who are uninformed about what causes mental illness, many of us will say, well, they're just self centered. They just want attention. Why don't they get over it? And if only it were that simple. So I applaud J.P. Cullen and I applaud you for taking a leadership role in promoting better mental health. And the any newscast that you watch is a daily confirmation of how widespread this problem is, and not it's not geographically limited, it's not limited in any way, it's not economically limited, and so people across a wide spectrum can be impacted. And thank you for the good work
Sure.
that you're doing there.
Yep.
One final question is
Sure.
what we have time for, Jeannie, and that is, we've talked about communication. We've talked about management. We've talked about being an executive. If you had to pick the number one ingredient for becoming an excellent corporate leader, executive, what would that be?
The number one. That's
Or you can give one or two if you'd like.
Yeah, I would probably say, commitment and then a passion for learning and improving. Those two things coming together. I am very blessed to be a part of our family business, but I'm also very committed and passionate about learning and getting better and moving the business forward. And I think the combination of those two things allows me to be a great leader, a great team member. Also, balancing the home life with the 5 kids, as you mentioned, is a big deal too. So I just try and do those two things along with a couple others, and hopefully we'll continue to have success, and alongside my brother and our JP Cullen team, keep moving the business forward. It's pretty incredible to be a 5th generation family business, and we're fortunate to be here, and looking forward to seeing what we can do for our generation, and then hopefully the 6th and 7th generations moving forward.
Well, thank you. And I think that's the ingredients you mentioned are so vital. Jeannie, thank you so much for being with us today on the Biz Communication Show. We're very grateful, and I encourage our viewers and our listeners to follow my YouTube channel. It's listed as Bill Lampton, Ph.D. You'll find previous episodes of the Biz Communication Show on there. And I invite you as well to visit my website, bizcommunicationguy.com. Since I'm the Biz Communication Guy, that's quite logical. And my phone number, 678-316-4300. Again, Jeannie, thank you so much for being
Thanks,
our
Jeff.
guest on the Biz Communication Show.
Thanks.
And we invite you to be with us again next week for another version where we have another great guest on the Biz Communication.